Wallowing in number 10 with no mates, it's Rishi Sunak, who is electorally screwed after Lee Anderson's defection. Plus, reports of a raft of MPs wishing to leave the party have led to knives being brandished by rebels who want the Prime Minister's head on a plate. Let's bring back Maddie, Andrew and Laura Dodsworth. They're all here. We were talking before, Laura, about whether or not there is a thirst for a new leader at this point. There may not be a thirst for a new leader until May, but if it was to be Penny Mordaunt, you know, there's a lot of people, as you say, who think she's a bit wet, think she's a bit woke, think she's not that conservative. Tell me more.
I mean, there's a couple of things in her leadership campaign before. It was very dull, you know, it was very pragmatic. She talked about it being about the ship, not the leader of the ship, so I'm not even sure what she's talking about. But for me, one of the key litmus tests of whether somebody's fit to lead the country is, can they speak basic truths? And it comes back to the gender question. I'm like a broken record on this, but she's one of those who said that trans women are women. She's done a bit of a volte-face on this recently because that turned out that wasn't in line with what voters really want, but she's been very, very woke on gender. You know, Suella Braverman said that Penny Mordaunt was one who wanted maternity legislation to be degendered and talk about pregnant people. I think that, while it'd be exciting to have another female Prime Minister, we want a female Prime Minister who knows what female means. Yes,
that would be helpful. And that's the thing, the Tory party's been sort of pulled in one direction and then back into another direction. It doesn't really know, it's still got a kind of identity crisis, hasn't it, at the moment, Madeline?
Well, I'd say there are, which Tory party? There seem to be a few. And I think we've been somewhat blindsided about the absolutely enormous differences that exist between them, because obviously in 2019 you had the clustering effect of not only Jeremy Corbyn but also the Brexit fatigue, and Boris Johnson was promising to put an end to all of that. And all of these disparate groups really came together. But it seems that there are all sorts of differences, and the difficulty for the Prime Minister is trying to find a narrative where you keep one group on side without offending the other. And you could have an MP in the southeast or in the sort of the sort of Midland Shires or something, and they might be facing off against a Lib Dem. So they will probably not love the Rwanda policy. They will have different things that they want the Prime Minister to be talking about more. And then, in the Red Wall, there could be something completely different. So the difficulty is trying to somehow weld all these groups together.
And is there a genuine threat from reform? I mean, will there be 10 to 12 Tory MPs who might consider actually quitting before an election?
Well, I'm not sure about that. There were rumours that Scott Benton, who's the MP for Blackpool South, I want to say, definitely one of the Blackpool seats, but that doesn't seem to have materialised. Reform have picked a different candidate, quite sensibly, I would say. There hasn't been the mass exodus post Lee Anderson, but I think in terms of, the bigger danger is more just them eroding the Tory majorities in every single constituency. And let's not forget that in 2019, one thing that massively helped them was the fact that Nigel Farage agreed to stand back the Brexit Party in those seats. And there's actually quite a lot of very prominent people in the Labour Party who owe their existence as MPs to the fact that the Brexit Party ran in these seats. People like Yvette Cooper wouldn't be in the House of Commons. Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary. We forget how well they did and how much worse for the Tories it could have been without that.
Absolutely.
And they're definitely not going to do that this time around.
No, definitely not. Just before
Richard
we carry
Tice has
on,
made it very clear he's not going to. He's written to everybody saying we're not going to step aside.
And people never change their minds before elections,
of course
do they?
not.
So that must be not going to happen. Let's look at Rishi Sunak today, though. He insisted today that he was not interested in Westminster politics, rather strangely, because he said he wanted to make sure that the party was altogether behind him. Here he is speaking on the matter a little bit earlier.
I'm not interested in all Westminster politics. It doesn't matter. What matters is the future of our country. And that's what I'm squarely focused on. That's what I get up every morning working as hard as I can to deliver, whether it's cutting people's taxes, increasing the state pension, today increasing the number of apprenticeships and talking to small businesses. Those are the things that matter to people. And as we've seen over the last few weeks, our plan is working. Inflation is coming down. Wages are growing. The economy is back to growing again. And if we stick to this plan, I can deliver a brighter future for everyone in our country. That's what I'm doing.
Well, really? I mean, the economy's growing by 0.2%, right?
It still makes me cross that he was the Chancellor that presided over all the money printing, the furlough, and the disastrous economic consequences of lockdown. This is why we are where we why we are where we are.
This is where the plan has got us to, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yes, no, you're absolutely right. I think the reality is we need a leader that has very clear policies, and this is his selling point. If he keeps telling everybody that Labour has no policies, and you keep saying, look, here are my policies, this is what we're going to stand against, and forget all the silly little petty politics and people backstabbing. What you need to do is think about the country. If you make people scared, it was P.T. Barnum and also the father of PR who turned around and said that the best way of selling anything to people is through fear. If you make people scared that we're on a path to recovery, and if you don't continue on this path, you're going to lose out, that's the way he could win this election.
Yeah, but the trouble is, I think most people now don't believe a word that either party says, do they? I mean, that's the problem. They're not even being frightened by Rishi Sunak. They just don't believe him anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that, right, so I think he's been very unlucky in some ways. I mean, has made mistakes, some mistakes on his watch, some very bad communication, but he's also slightly the victim of things beyond his control. But after all, he did want this job, you know. And
also, I mean, everything's always going to be outside of your control. I mean, it's an event.
Well, for example, the Rwanda policy, I think he sort of felt at the time that he became Tory leader that he basically, in order to kind of show the right of his party that he meant business, he had to kind of tether himself to the Rwanda policy, which was the brainchild of Boris Johnson and Priti Patel. And, I mean, obviously, the big mistake was then not showing that there was just one of many things they were trying to do, and it's become the absolute focal point of migration policy. And that was a big communications error. But there are sort of things that are, I don't think are entirely his fault, but, them's the breaks.
But also he's in charge, and he will have to take the rap, I'm afraid, won't he?
If one plane takes off, I think it is going to be a win for Rishi Sunak. Now, whether you think it's a suitable deterrent or not, and, there's arguments on both sides, about whether Australia's offshore system has worked. I don't think that's the point. I think what any kind of casual, ordinary observer can see is that our parliamentary sovereign law is being thwarted by people who use international law to try to stop something that they ideologically oppose. And that feels fundamentally unfair, wrong. It's a misuse of law.
Undemocratic.
It's undemocratic. And that in itself is the bothersome thing. I mean, there's also the sunk cost fallacy. I mean, this by now is terrifying. We spent 240 billion on Rwanda, 240 million on Rwanda until the end of 2023. But it's going to go to 370 million. And nobody wants to be lost in a sunk cost fallacy. But you think, well, we spent that much. Let's at least get one plane off the ground. We spend £8 million a day on asylum housing costs.
It's shocking.
It's insane. So if it might work as a deterrent, it's worth it. But what he would show is that he's beaten the blob. And I think that would really rouse quite a lot of support in his favour.
I think you also have to look at what is happening in other parts of Britain. I read an amazing piece by Matthew Syed this weekend in the Sunday Times. He went to Rochdale, got off the train. He saw 6 mosques within earshot of, or within sort of, eyesight of the train station. There's a school opposite the train station. It's got 450 kids in it. Only one of them is white. Now, you can make any argument you like, but that is not the Britain that an awful lot of people are used to, and not the sort of Britain that a lot of people want to live in. And, that's already gone. And I'm sure there are other places like Rochdale. There's also a massive, problem with poor white underclass kids as well, who go to another school which is more or less completely white. But there's a lot of segregation now in society, a lot of it caused by mass immigration.
Well, it's the failure of multiculturalism, because if you laud diversity itself as a quality to aspire to, it is literally opposed to the principle of integration.
It doesn't work.
Integration is absolutely key.
It just cannot work, and it's been a huge failure of this government.
What you are going to find, though, Sunak's going to start getting some wins on all of his 5 promises, I can guarantee over the next few years.
I look forward to you apologising to me down the road when that turns out to be completely not a balderdash.
You should be doing a wager. That's talkTV.
Yeah,
that's
what they do on Piers Morgan show, because they've got loads of money.
Exactly.
That's not what we do here.